What's going on, you guys? It's your boy 360 Stacks in this thing, baby, representing TKOG. I'm actually doing a top 10 meta decks, the best decks of the format after BANLIST. So there's a lot of changes. People are going to have to adapt. A lot of people are probably scrambling for their cards, trying to figure out what they want to play, and if they're playing the same deck, how they're going to adapt it, what they're going to cut, what changes are they going to make moving forward. There's a lot of side decks that are about to change because there's certain decks people were preparing for that they might not have to worry about. So this is really informative for people that are just trying to get a fresh outlook on a new format. In retrospect, obviously, if it wasn't for the ban list, I don't think this would be necessary because the format was kind of solved, but I don't think the format's solved right now. I think there's too many decks thriving with potential that have not only representation and results to back that up, but the sheer ceiling of these decks. Some of these decks, their ceiling is just so high, it's just hard to ignore it when you know that this deck is around and you know how scary and powerful it is. But before I get into this, I want to say if you like my content and you can see yourself watching in the future, please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell to make sure that you are getting notified, and also staying up to date with me, staying in the loop with me, catching me on the upside. And if you are feeling generous and you want to help a brother out, whether you want to just buy some of my merchandise, donate to my PayPal or Patreon. My Patreon is more or less the best way to do it because I give back to those who give to me in my Patreon. Or if you just want to show your support just by joining my community, you can join my Discord and become a part of my Yu-Gi-Oh community. With all those things said, I think we should go ahead and just say, let's go! Wavy, baby. All right. Let me wait for my music. This is my non-copyrighted music right here, bro. You know what I'm saying? This is my non-copyrighted. I use this right here, and I'll be like, look, you ain't suing me. You ain't suing me. You can't see me. So let's talk about this top 10, right? So, in number 10, we have Buster Blader Dogmatica Dragoon. A nightmare of a deck. So what is this deck capable of, and why do I have it on the list? So the sheer ceiling of this deck is through the roof, right? I almost wanted to say quite literally for a play on words. So what can this deck offer? So, excuse me, I just ate. So the sheer output of the boards that this deck can make involve Dragoon, a literal Buster Lock. Because of the ban list, there is a literal Buster Lock. So you can end on Dragoon, Dragoon and Window? Isn't that enough? No, it's not enough. Buster Dragon, the Buster's Destruction Swordsman, Fleur de Lis, and even Punishment. Those are all things you have to offer. So this deck can literally end on an Omni Negate. You can only special summon once. Oh, wait. If it wasn't as bad, now you can't even use your extra deck. You can't activate monster effects. And then you have a Punishment and a Knighted. This deck is very consistent. It has a lot of starters. It has powerful cards, a lot of blowout must negate cards. You can't let Prologue resolve. You can't let Memories resolve. You can't let Red Ice Fusion resolve. You just can't let Nadir Servant resolve. You can't let Buster Whelp resolve. Like, there's just too many powerful cards. One of the things with this deck is it's not the best deck. I'm going to turn this volume down a little bit. It's not the best deck when it comes to going second, but going first, this deck is an absolute nightmare. There's really no deck except maybe Eldritch that would stand a chance of playing out of those boards because Eldritch doesn't need monster effects or an extra deck. But the fact that they still have to look at a Dragoon and a Winda, even Eldritch would have a most difficult time. Like, it's just really, really hard to crack the boards that this deck can make. It's just way too hard. And the Buster Lock makes it even more difficult because before, Buster Blader was just setting up pretty much a skill drain. But now, because their card is back off the ban list, the Buster Destruction Sword, the card that you would normally equip off Union Carrier, which is banned, you can actually send this from your deck to your grave off of their Link 2 and equip it from your grave to one of your cards off of Buster Dragon the Synchro and literally lock your opponent from playing Yu-Gi-Oh! As far as monster effects and also accessing your extra deck goes. And then you're still staring at a Dragoon, you're still staring at a Winda from the Dogmatica cards, you're still staring at a Fleur de Lis, you're still staring at a Punishment, and you are looking at quite a bit of hand traps and back rows, which is just ridiculous. This deck is one of the most powerful control decks moving forward into the new format. There's a lot of hatred that this deck does not have to deal with, and granted, there wasn't as much it had to do with before, but I think with some of the most popular decks having to take a step back, I think Virtual World survived the most. When it comes to Virtual World and Drytron, Virtual World survived the most from the ban list. They lost none of their real like enablers for the deck to function, but the functionality of Drytron at their core has actually been affected by the ban list. But anyways, that's moving on to the other list, cards in the list, decks in the list. So Buster Blader, Dogmatica, Dragoon is just a scary deck. It's a powerhouse. Like I said, when it comes to going second, the only cards that really help you to crack boards would be the Red Ice cards. Because, like, you got Red Ice Fusion and Red Ice Insight, thank you, Lord Jesus, are all at 3. Dragoon's at 3. Verde Anaconda's still legal. And then you have Nadir Servant and the Dogmatica cards, just enabling you to play through interruptions, hand traps, break boards, crack through negates. Those are the best cards when it comes to that, but they're all just as fragile and resilient to hand traps going second as they are going first. So this deck is going to have a lot of difficulty playing through hand traps, especially if people are being smart and siding the right hand traps or maining the right hand traps. Skullmeister is still going to be really strong. Gold Spell and Ash Blossom are really, really powerful against this deck. So it has its pros and cons. It has incredible boards that it can make, but a lot of choke points. So that's why this deck is at number 10. I feel like if it could play through hand traps better, it might be on a higher tier. If it could break boards better going second without losing to an Ash or a Ghost Spell, it might be up on the higher tier. But for that simple fact, I think it can't go any further than number 10 because all the other decks on this list can play through multiple hand traps and keep going. But with this deck, if you like Ash the Red Ice Fusion, it's like Nadir Servant for what? You know what I mean? You can't summon that turn. It's kind of hard. And the only strength I want to say that it comes through playing through hand traps is when your opponent tries to hand trap your normal summon Protector Whelp and you drew a Trap Trick or a Prologue. So you're essentially getting access to the Buster Lock, not the full Buster Lock, but the Skill Drain Lock, playing through an Ash Blossom. So there's like here and there, you know, it's nice, but going second, that doesn't really help you. Like having to set a skill drain up through multiple negates is really, really hard. So I want to say if somebody just took the composition of the deck building to the next level and really just was mindful of the weaknesses that this deck had, this deck can easily be a powerhouse. And I truly believe that is a threat that you want to be on the lookout for. You definitely don't want to be caught slipping against this deck because this deck is very, very powerful and very, very scary. When you can't access your extra deck, when you're looking at an Omni Negate, when you can only special summon one time, and when you can't activate your monster effects on field, it's really scary. One of the biggest strengths this deck has is because Dragon Link is probably going to become more popular all over again. This deck is the Dragon Slayer, bruh. Buster Blader literally claps all the dragon's cheeks. Matter of fact, he lines them up and makes them wait their turn to get their cheeks clapped, bruh. So definitely consider that Buster Blader is the anti-Dragon Link deck. That might make people want to play this deck even more for the simple fact that it has a literal win condition. Because the fusion words possession. Buster Dragon doesn't make all monsters in your possession become dragons, just monsters you control. But possession implies just like True King of all Chlamydia. So he's like a True King of all Chlamydia against Dragon Link. Their cards go to defense, they can't attack unless they're links, and then they cannot activate their effects. They can't pay costs, and all their cards, including in the graveyard, cannot activate their effects. So it's really hard to get over that card. You might say, oh, you could just summon Borsword and attack it. How are you going to do that when you can't access your extra deck? And if that man is in attack position, he's gaining all that attack. So it's like really, really, really hard to out him. Some people might say Dark Ruler and Super Poly and Droplets, but the Buster Lock itself that locks you from your extra deck plays around Super Poly, Dark Ruler, and Droplets. So this deck is very scary, but it's pretty fragile, so it's nothing to be too worried about, but you definitely want to be on the lookout for this deck because it's a monster. Like, it's a monstrosity. In number 9, I have Phantom Knights. I think moving forward, and I truly believe, because this deck already has really decent representation, a lot of people have found some really cool ways to innovate Phantom Knights, and people are literally ending on Appaloosa, Fog Blades, and Dragoon, and Evil Storm Nightmare consistently with a multitude of follow-ups, even if that board is not the best against every deck, because I'm not going to lie, I feel like a lot of Phantom Knight players make really redundant boards, and they only put up interruptions against monsters. But nonetheless, because the board's so good and it's pretty difficult to crack, and the fact that this deck has self-sustaining, self-replacing cards, where every board you make has a multitude of follow-ups to play in your graveyard for your recovery and your follow-ups, It just makes this deck very well-rounded. It's a lot better going second. It's a lot better playing through hand traps than the Buster Blader deck is. It can play through a multitude of hand traps. This deck can end on multiple interruptions, even through Lancia. This deck can play through Ash, Bell, and Nibiru. It can play through Droll and Lockbird. This deck is really powerful. Good Phantom Knight players are very hard to come by in this day and age, but the good Phantom Knight players, I ain't gonna lie, bruh. They are really, really nice, and they make this deck look so good. It is very promising, very powerful, and honestly, this deck has just so much to offer. Rusty being at 3 doesn't really change much. It's just the way this deck operates now, especially with VFD being banned, and the fact that this deck has a literal graveyard-based, it's a graveyard-based archetype. It means even if Virtual World were to hand loop this deck, you'd be discarding Phantom Knight cards that actually plus in the graveyard. So Virtual World's little hand loop gimmick is not going to work against some of these decks. And when we get deeper into the list, you guys will see that some decks are immune to hand looping. You can't just tribute Gothams and rip my cards and think I'm not going to plus. You're discarding my Phantom Knights, you're discarding my Shaddoll cards, you're discarding my Eldritch cards. You know, there are some decks that actually benefit from hand looping. So don't think that Virtual World's just going to clap everybody's cheeks, because they're not. But I think Phantom Knights have a lot to offer. They're very resilient, like I said. My build's a Kali Yuga build. I think Kali Yuga's better than Opalus and Fog Blaze. Those things can be played through, but you can't, if Kali Yuga hits the field, you can't play through it. You know, once he hits the field, it's just game over. It's just like, everything's negated, bro. Like that whole turn, like everything's negated. And then on top of that, he is literally like a heavy storm, which is pretty insane. So the Kali Yuga route for me is a lot better. And with VFD and Zexal being banned, that's probably the next thing that people are going to try to abuse. I've been abusing it. My Phantom Knight build has been playing Kali Yuga, like literally even before Tier Scale came out and was legal. I was testing it as an OCG card. And I'm telling you, Kali Yuga is the best build for Phantom Knights, honestly. But this deck is just so scary good. Moving into number 8, I have Drytron. So not gonna lie, bro, there's a fall from grace here. Not only was this deck not the best deck, even at full power, but it also was so solved and people figured out how to beat this deck that you would literally see top tier events, remote duels, extravaganzas. Nobody was playing Drytron, right? And you know why? Because a lot of people started noticing that the weaknesses that this deck had, people were mindful of its weaknesses. They side decked and main decked so much hate for this deck that it was really hard to play through Cycle Readers and Drolls, and it was really hard to play through Droplets. Now that Unicarrier's banned, there ain't no Gachiri, Adignister, B-Buster Drake, oh, I'm immune to Dark Ruler and Droplets. Every board this deck makes now is susceptible to Dark Ruler and Droplets. This deck is not as consistent as it used to be. Unicarrier means your combo is not getting you an extra Drytron name. That is huge. That is huge. That means this deck's consistency is lowered. It means you only have one Benton. You can't really abuse Natasha the way you used to. So even this deck's ceiling going first is lowered, and the ceiling going second has lowered. You're not breaking boards with Natasha like you used to. This deck is not abusing Benton after over and over and over, and it should have never done that because I hate that deck for doing that. Like, why did you do that to my Benton? But I'm just not going to get distracted and sidetracked. But I really still think that this deck is very, very powerful. It's an aggressive powerhouse. It can break boards going second, make boards going first. You could still set up Herald of Ultiminus. You could still play the Megalith cards. You could still play your Necros cards. It can play any ritual cards, to be honest. So there's a lot of room for creativity. And I think Benton and Unicarrier being hit make the deck more flexible. For the main deck, you have more flex spots. You have to cut down your 2 Bentons and your 1 Natasha and your 1 Dawn Knight. That's 4 open slots for you. That could be 4 more hand traps. Or that could be a 4-card Megalith package that you don't even have to cut anything for, because you have to take out Dawn Knight anyways. I mean, you could still play Dawn Knight as a normal summon if you just want a normal Dawn Knight, like play 3 Dawn Knights and a reinforcement of the army, and you just normal summon Dawn Knight, link him and another Drytron into the Herald of Mirage Lights. You could still trigger Dawn Knight to send from deck to grave. So the deck is not really dead. I'm never one to say a deck's dead until I see that it's literally dead. I don't like to speculate decks are dead. I don't know what this deck's going to do moving forward, but I do know it's really, really powerful. It's still setting up a you can't play Yu-Gi-Oh board. The Megalith cards give it more resilience, and the ability to recur your Benton from graveyard off of full kind of somewhat mitigates the fact that Benton is at 1, and you have a better back row matchup, and the deck's able to play through a lot more hand traps. I think this deck is not going anywhere, and when their XYZ comes out, the deck is going to get a lot more popular, and there's going to be crackheads coming to play it. Moving forward, number 7, we have Invoke Dogmatica. This is a really powerful mid-range and control deck. It's one of the simplest. In fact, this is the simplest deck on this list outside of Brain Dead Eldritch. But Invoke Dogmatica is the second most simple, straightforward, and sometimes borderline linear decks to play. It has so many powerful cards to exploit. The Dogmatica cards and the Invoke cards are respectively good going first and going second. Alistair is the man. He's always going to take a hand trap from your opponent, and when you have the invocation, you're obviously playing through that hand trap. Your Dogmatica cards enable you to have access to Schism. They enable you to have access to Elder, Entity, Omega, Dogmatica Punishment, Fleur de Lis, and Maximus are all incredibly powerful cards. Nadir Servant is literally broken, and it's going to stay at 3 for a very long time. I don't think it'll ever get hit, to be honest. It's one of those cards that it's really strong, but it's like, it's not like literally like so broken that people are like, oh, it has to be hit. People are probably going to cry about it now, because when people run out of stuff to cry about, they look for something else to cry about. So now that VFD's banned, they're probably going to look for other stuff to complain about. Instead of just adapting it better at the game, they're just going to complain. But I think Invoke Dogmatica is crazy. Macabre Winda is a really hard board to crack. You're having consistent access to Punishment. You've got Invoke the Guadis. You've got Kaliga if you really want to play it. Raijin, Invoke Elysium. The deck can main deck Super Poly. It can main deck up to 13 hand traps. It has a lot of consistency cards, a lot of power, and it's just a very simple deck. You can main deck traps and hand traps respectively. Your Ice Dragons, Prisons, your Solemn Strikes, whatever you want to play. The deck is just really, really good at what it does, and it's very good going second. Because when you're opening Meltdown, and Invocation, and Alistair, and Nadir Servant, and Ecclesia, these cards are just designed to break boards and to make boards. So this deck is very, very well-rounded and versatile, and it's a lot more durable. It's way too powerful for the little amount of work you have to put in. It's just way too powerful for you to not have to put in that much work. This deck is a really, really powerful deck, and it is so good against everything right now, even control decks. It is just so resilient. It plays through back row after back row. Alistair is just so freaking powerful. Like, that card is so good, and Meltdown is absolutely disgusting. This deck is nowhere near dead. In fact, I think it's going to get more and more popular. Invoke Dogmatica is just really, really terrifying, you guys. I just can't stress it enough. This deck is just really, really good. I'm not going to lie. It definitely deserves to be in a higher spot than the rest of the decks beneath it, because it's not only more consistent and more resilient, but it's able to play through more interruptions more consistently. Because 3 Meltdowns and Terraforming plus Alistair means if Alistair gets Ash and you have an invocation, you're playing through it. If Ecclesia gets negated, that means your Nadir Servant's resolved. So because you have a redundancy in your starters, that you have like 6 to 7 starters that get access to the same engine, when you draw 2 of each of those, if your opponent hand traps one portion of it and you have the second card being they hand trapped Alistair but you have the invocation, you're playing through it. They hand trapped Ecclesia but you have the Nadir Servant, you're playing through it, or vice versa. The deck's just really good. It can main deck so many tech cards like Talents, Droplets, Prison, all the hand traps. It's just so flexible. It has so much room for just growth and exploits. Like, you can just exploit so much with this deck. Moving forward to number 6. Let me turn this music up. Alright, let me turn it back down. Shadows! Bruh! Shadows! You guys might have never thought the Shadows would be considered meta again, but I have to say, as much as I want this deck to be rogue, I cannot ignore the results. This deck has literally Invoke Dogmatica Shadows specifically, even before Andres Torres piloted it. There was like a build 3 months ago in a LCS. I know it sounds crazy to say 3 months ago. I say 3 months ago because I'm saying this deck has been on an incline. Incline meaning rising up in popularity, and it's not really slowing down. Like, a lot of people are acknowledging how good Shadows are now. I feel like all those people that really didn't acknowledge Shadows before, I feel like they don't deserve. For me, you're not worthy to be a Shadow player. If you were saying the deck's bad, but then you just see a bunch of people playing it, so you're just like bandwagoning, and you're like, oh, everybody's playing it, I'm just gonna play it too. So I don't really respect some people that play Shadows because they're not true Shadow players that are true to the archetype and loyal to it, and we're playing it even when people said it was bad. Like me and my friends, we were playing Shadows non-stop, bruh. We were playing it for years, like 6 years, since like 2015, bruh. Like, I'm totally different format. We were never stopping playing Shadows. And then you have people that played Invoke Shaddolls a year ago and then dropped it immediately, said it was bad, and then came back to playing Invoke Shaddolls again. So Shaddolls have all these different variants that have a lot of versatility when it comes to deck building, the composition of your deck, what you play. And because the deck is so flexible and adaptable, there's so many tech cards, anti-meta cards, and just a lot of hatred that you can throw towards the meta playing Shaddolls. So there's Trap Shaddolls, there's Magistus Shaddolls, there's Pure Shaddolls, there's Invoke Dolls, and then there's Dogmatica Dolls. And you can do a combination of both. You can do Invoke Dogmatica Shaddolls, you can do Magistus Trap Shaddolls, you can do Trap Dogmatica Shaddolls. There's so many ways to play Shaddolls, but what I like about them is this deck is good going first or going second. You have Shaddol Fusion and El Shaddol Fusion being your main enablers. You can disrupt your opponent's plays with cards like Neo Shaddol, Ariel, and Dragon. Every Shaddol monster is just so good. They have 2 effects per Shaddol monster. This deck has the biggest toolbox in the game. Shaddol Schism is just a nightmare of a card to deal with. And when you have Meltdown up, obviously it just gets way too powerful, right? So Invoke Dogmatica Shaddol is probably the most powerful variant when it comes to consistency and the ability to crack through these boards people are going to be setting up. Because if you're playing Trap Shaddolls, one of the things you have to be mindful of, because I like anything that has to do with Shaddolls, I would never downplay it. Shaddolls are just Shaddolls, right? I love this deck so much. But with a lot of people are going to be on the Drytron route, the Megalith route. Now, for anybody playing trap decks, you have to be wary of people summoning a Breaksword to Fogblade Zone to pop your trap. You have to be wary of Dogmatica Punishment, sending Elder to pop your monster and your back row, which again, you might just set it face down and you can't be punished. But I'm just telling you, there are things that you might want to be mindful of. You have Zeus. Being able to literally send all your traps to the graveyard before you get a chance to use them, which obviously is just if they get to attack and set that up. You also have Drytron setting up the Megalith cards for a Megalith Bathor to pop all of your back rows the turn you set them. So there are some adaptability. There's like a lot of adaptability. People are going to have to really basically sacrifice what they want for what they need. And I think Trap Dolls might need to play a supplemental engine. If it's Magistus, if it's Dogmatica cards, if you just want to throw in just any kind of enablers to make sure that your starters, your only starters, are not just the trap cards themselves. Because I want Shaddolls to thrive. I have it in number 6 because Shaddolls can play the Invoked and the Dogmatica cards and still be a Shaddol deck. So they have everything that deck has and more. Shaddol Fusion is just a nightmare of a card. And this deck's resource, and oh my goodness, the resources this deck can get is just ridiculous. This deck can advance its game state or even literally choose not to move forward and just play a very, very slow, grindy, mid-range control playstyle. This deck is so adaptable. It is honestly the most versatile of all these 10 decks that I'm talking about. Shaddolls are the most versatile. They're just so good. I can go on about how powerful this deck is, but this deck really doesn't necessarily care about dice rolls. It doesn't matter going first or second. There's just some builds that are just way too resilient to hand traps, to back row hate. This deck can play out of every scenario you would put it in, including outing the Buster Lock. The fact that Shaddol Dragon activates in Graveyard, you can out the Buster Lock and still super poly their board. So there's just so much this deck has to offer. It's so good, you guys. This deck's so good. I can sit here and talk longer about Shaddolls, but I think they speak for themselves and why I put them in number 6. They're only going to get more popular, and people are starting to get really scared of this deck. It's becoming a problem. Dueling Book is just flourishing right now. All over the place, people want to play Shaddolls. I wish they would have just acknowledged the deck in the first place instead of waiting for like a bandwagon to happen. But coming into the top 5, in number 5, I put Eldritch, Zodiac Eldritch, Dragoon Eldritch, Pure Eldritch, Eldritch. This deck is just tried and true. I think Shaddolls are better. That's just my personal take. But I cannot take away from Eldritch representation. Eldritch is just so popular right now. It has a really, really high win rate. There's so many Eldritch variants that are thriving. This deck has played out of so many scenarios that people would think that, oh, well, Shin just beats this deck. Well, then how the heck does it still beat Virtual World? It's like, this deck can play so many powerful cards, hand traps, back rows, supplemental engines. Zodiac Eldritch is the most popular Eldritch variant, but the fact that the Eldritch engine is just so resilient, it's so durable, it lasts for such a long time. And then Golden Lord just himself, and being an enabler going first and going second to disrupt your opponent's board, to be able to out problematic cards. It's a literal out to like the Buster Lock If they don't have Dragoon, it's an out to the Buster Lock. It forces out cards like Appaloosa multiple times. This deck is just so good. Like, I cannot take away from Eldritch. They're good going first and going second. You can main deck Torrential, Needle Ceiling, Ice Dragons, Prison, Solemn Strike, Crackdown, Dimensional Barrier. I mean, dang, there's a list of trap cards that I could talk about. And then the Zodiac cards are really, really good. There's a lot of synergistic properties here. The fact that Zeus can attack Eldritch cards from your deck to him as a material to start your Eldritch engine. The fact that Trident can pop your Cursed Eldin to get your Eldritch engine going. The fact that this deck can benefit from Forbidden Droplets, play tag cards like Book of Moon and Cosmic Cyclone. It's just the adaptability and versatility of this deck is kind of similar to Shadal's. It's not just how good the deck is, it's how many good cards you can play in this deck, and its results speak for themselves. And then coming into number 4, we have Tri-Brigade Bird Up. Now this deck is absolutely 100,000% about to blow up. This deck right here is about to be so popular. You guys are going to get sick and tired of seeing this. Next ban list, people are going to be saying, please ban some more. Please ban all the Tri-Brigade cards. You know how it is. Any deck that thrives, the good cards just can't exist. For some of these, like, Yu-Gi-Oh players, their mindset is just so backwards. It's like, good cards cannot just exist for them. But the Bird Up Tri-Brigade deck, I will say, really, really, really good. This deck is really powerful. It has, from starters to extenders, every single one of its starters and extenders can literally, by themselves, put out a disruption apiece. Every Tri-Brigade body that hits the field is a disruption. It is a Link 2 that can bounce cards. It is a Link 3 that can put out a Floodgate or an Omni Negate. It is a Link 4 that can non-targeting removal banish cards. This deck can set up the Barrier Statue. It can set up some more. No infinite negates because Union Carrier is banned. But this deck, because it's so resilient, I mean, every deck has its weaknesses. I think Lancia is just so good against this deck. But the fact that this deck is not just what it is, but because it has searchable hand traps, it's able to play through hand traps so well. It can crack boards going first and going second. It makes a really, really nice Zeus as well. This deck is just so good. In fact, a lot of these decks on this list, because they play Zeus, their ceiling is just higher. I think the Bird Up deck is not going anywhere. It's only going to get more popular. And right now, the boards that it's making are really, really powerful. You can set up Appaloosa and Samorg and the Link 2 Ancient Warriors monster and Link Rebo and still summon your Barrier Statue at the end phase. This deck can play through Nibiru or around Nibiru. This deck can play through multiple hand traps. I don't know how well it fares against Lancia, but I think the Tri-Brigade aspect gets cut off. But then the Lyralist cards can still, like, I don't know, search a DD Pro, you get something out of it. I do think that this deck is not fully solved. There's still so much more room for creativity. This deck is only going to get better, but I definitely think it deserves the number 4 spot because this deck is just scary good, you guys. It absolutely, bro. It's like, it's going to be clapping a lot of cheeks, bro. It already is. Like, this Bird Up deck ain't no joke. And it's so consistent. Like, goodness gracious. This deck just don't break. And then at number 3, we have Dinosaurs. Now, this deck is a powerhouse. I don't even have to say much, but this meme right here. Hey, to have you read Mist. Hey, to have you read Miscellaneousaurus. The card that everybody wanted to get hit. So Conductor's still at 3. You still got your pills. You still got your Oviraptors. You still got your Digs. You still got your Miscellaneousaurus. You're still ending on like Pankratops, UCT, or Overtext Quadlist, or even multiples of those. And you still have the Evilzar XYZs, which are literally like a fat no, like capital NO to anything, whether it's Doka or Lagia or both. You can still set up a consistent turn 1 Abyss Dweller, which is really good against a lot of decks. This deck is so good going first and even scarier going second. Dinos are not going anywhere, and I'm afraid to say that this deck is just going to become more powerful because as long as Dragon Link is a popular deck, Dinosaurs are going to be there. Dragon Link and Dinosaurs have been there to keep each other in check. I think Dinosaurs are just really, really strong. There's not much to say because this deck's been around for so long, but I just know Dinosaurs are just too good, bruh. They're too good. And there's a fun note that I want to point out. Lost World actually prevents virtual world monsters from targeting other monsters for their effects. So Lost World is just a whole nother thing. It plays around evenly, Lightning Storm, like Gamma, bruh. Like, this deck is just nuts. It can play around everything. It doesn't care about Nibiru. There's just so much that this deck can push through. Number 2, I have Dragon Link. Playing Dragon Mage just makes me like Dragon Link more because I have a lot more respect for this deck. This deck is so dang good. It's always been resilient. It's always been able to play through 3-4 negates, multiple hand traps, through Nibiru, through Ash. This deck can play through Droll. It can play around Lancia. I mean, this deck is just so good. The end boards are ridiculous. The inboards are ridiculous. Better follow-ups, Tiding, Seal, Savage, a Floodgate that says you can't special summon from the grave, Omni-Negate, Abyss, Omni-Negate, Savage, going second, Borsword, OTK, Chaos Dragon, Legionnaire, hand looping. This deck is so hard to hand trap, so hard to beat. Dragon Link is not going anywhere, and I'm afraid to say that if it wasn't for Virtual World, this deck would probably be the best deck in the format. That's how scary Dragon Link is. Heretic Dragon of Heavenly Spheres is just way too powerful of a card. The fact that you can access a Morphage Sloth or Kawaki Mara Draco just as floodgates to back up the resilience of your board, this deck's boards just don't really lose to Dark Roller and Droplets because of that and having access to Dragon Maid Tiding. This deck is not going anywhere, and it's just going to incline in popularity. And finally, we have Virtual Worlds. I have to clear my throat. Virtual Worlds. This deck is tier 1. This is the best deck of the format. Not only is this deck still able to hand loop you, still end up to set up Dragoon, Crystal Wing, Bamboozling, Gossip, Shadow, whatever that rank 3 is called. Literally sets up multiple interruptions. The Hot Red Dragon, Archfiend, Abyss Synchro. This deck has Quinlong and Chuchi to enable going second. This deck has main deck answers to Winda. This deck literally has main deck answers to Doka, UCT, the Buster Lock. If they don't have the extra deck lock, just but Chuchi and Quinlong can out the Buster Lock and Buster Blader. This deck literally has forcible, like cards of force interaction going second. It's really, really scary. Like, honestly, Virtual Worlds are just way too powerful for their own good. This deck is still the best deck. Nothing's going to change that. I think a lot of people are going to have to main and side a lot of Virtual World hate because people might, they might speculate that this deck is not the best deck, but it is absolutely still the best deck. Virtual World is just, nothing changed. Like, not having VFD, Trishula, Gothams, Phantom Fortress, Indra Blathanier, no hand. VFD, gone, alright. Dragoon, Crystal Wing, Bamboozling, and that's excluding all the other, the rank 9, Sacred Tree, Omni-Negator, Chuchi, Quinlong, Hand Traps, Shinshin, 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 Shinshin. Every deck on this list struggles against Shinshin. Every single deck, Phantomize, Buster Blade, Drytron, Invoke, Shutoff, Eldritch, especially Eldritch, Birdo, Dinos, Dragon Link. Shin. Goodness, if you guys think this is not the best deck, you are crazy. This deck is not going anywhere. Virtual World is the best deck, period. Regardless of the consistency issues, this is the best deck. If you guys wanted the answer, Virtual World's still the best deck. It's unfortunate, but this is what it is. It's just what it is. I don't have to explain a lot. It's just what it is. It's good going first. It's good going second. This deck can main deck hand traps and back row hate. This deck is just way too good for its own good. Virtual World's the best deck, you guys. Virtual World is the best deck. It's better than everything on this list. I wish Shadalls were better. I want Shadalls to get their popularity and representation. No, I don't actually. I take that back. I don't want people playing my Shadalls. They're not worthy, bro. They're just... If you're not a true Shadall player, if you haven't been playing the deck like before it was popular or just even when Construct was banned, you're just not a true Shadall player. Some people just play Shadalls just because they see other people playing it. I play Shadalls because it's fun. I play it because it's enjoyable. I play it because I love the deck. I play it because it's just way... It just has like a big place in my heart, like where I just understand the deck like the back of my hand. Like, there's just some people that I just feel like they just shouldn't be playing Shadalls. And that's just me. But yeah, Virtual World is literally the best deck. If you guys want a more in-depth analysis on why Virtual World is the best deck, Virtual World is the best deck. I'm sorry, it tops like every event, bro. It's everywhere. It's beating everybody. It's clapping everybody's cheek. It's all over Dueling Book. Virtual World is just insane. Oh, I'm so tired of this deck. But anyways, God bless you guys. I don't have enough time to say the prayer. I think the video is about to cut off. But Jesus loves you guys, and peace.